Tom Caldwell had been a forest ranger for 43 years, and in all that time he'd never seen anything like this. The blizzard had come out of nowhere, one of those freak storms that could kill you in minutes if you weren't prepared. The temperature had dropped to -40, and the wind was howling so loud Tom could barely hear his own thoughts. At 70 years old, most men would have called it a day and stayed by the fire. But Tom wasn't built that way. He'd promised old Bill Henderson he'd check on his hunting cabin up north, and Tom Caldwell didn't break promises. He was making his way along the frozen lake when something caught his eye. At first he thought maybe a plane had gone down. There was this strange metallic shimmer through the snow, reflecting what little gray light pushed through the storm clouds. Tom squinted, his weathered face stinging from the cold, and moved closer. His boots crunched on the ice. His step felt heavy. Something in his gut told him this wasn't right, wasn't normal. In 4 decades of walking these woods, Tom had developed an instinct for when things were off. When he got within 20 feet, his heart nearly stopped. It was massive. Easily as long as a school bus, maybe longer. The thing was half buried in the ice, like it had crashed and the lake had frozen around it. But what got Tom wasn't the size. It was the scales. They covered the entire body, each one about the size of his hand, and they were glowing. Not bright, but flickering, pulsing with this blue and silver light that was getting weaker by the second. A dragon. His mind couldn't process it any other way. This was a dragon, right here in Alaska, frozen in Miller's Lake. Tom stepped closer, his breath coming out in white puffs. Parts of the creature were completely locked in ice. He could see frost forming on the scales, spreading like a disease. But other parts were still moving, barely. The chest rose and fell in shallow breaths. Steam was coming off certain sections where the scales were still trying to generate heat, fighting a losing battle against the Alaskan cold. Then Tom noticed something else. There were these small devices embedded along the creature's neck and spine. Technology. Actual alien technology built right into its body. This wasn't some undiscovered animal. This was something from somewhere else. Tom stood there in the screaming wind, snow piling on his shoulders, and did what any sensible person would do. He stared for about 5 seconds, his mind trying to catch up with what his eyes were seeing. Then his ranger training kicked in like a switch being flipped. Didn't matter what it was. Didn't matter where it came from. This thing was dying, and Tom Caldwell had spent his entire adult life saving things that were dying in these woods. He turned and ran. Well, ran as fast as a 70-year-old man could run through knee-deep snow in a blizzard. His station was a mile back, but adrenaline pushed him forward. His lungs burned from the cold air, but he didn't slow down. When he burst through his cabin door, he didn't waste time thinking. He grabbed everything. Every thermal blanket from his emergency supplies. His 3 propane heaters. Extra fuel canisters. His chainsaw. Heavy-duty extension cords. He loaded it all onto his snowmobile and headed back. The rational part of his brain was screaming at him. "This is crazy," it said. "You're 70 years old. You don't know what that thing is. Could be dangerous. Could be dead already. You're going to freeze yourself to death for nothing." But Tom had pulled injured hikers out of avalanches. He'd nursed wounded bears and wolves back to health. He'd climbed cliffs in thunderstorms to rescue stranded climbers. This was what he did. This was who he was. When he got back to the lake, the creature hadn't moved. Tom set up his heaters in a circle around it and fired them up. Then he started the chainsaw. The sound ripped through the storm as he carefully began cutting away the ice. He couldn't rush this. One wrong move and he might hurt it worse. For 3 days straight Tom worked. He barely slept. He'd doze for an hour, then wake up to check the heaters, to pour more heated water over the scales, to chip away more ice. His hands went numb, then painful, then numb again. His back screamed at him. His knees felt like someone was driving nails through them. But slowly, impossibly, it was working. The creature's breathing got stronger. The scales started glowing brighter. More of the body became free from the ice. Tom wrapped every inch he could reach in thermal blankets, creating this weird cocoon of human survival gear around an alien dragon. On the 3rd night, Tom was exhausted beyond exhausted. He'd run out of coffee. His fingers were shaking from cold and fatigue. He sat down heavily on the ice next to the creature, his back against a snowbank, and just watched the steady rise and fall of its chest. "You better make it," he muttered through cracked lips. "I'm too old to have wasted 3 days for nothing." That's when the eye opened. It was huge, easily the size of a dinner plate, and it was the most brilliant amber color Tom had ever seen. Not animal. Not mindless. There was intelligence there, sharp and aware and ancient. The eye focused on him, really looked at him, and Tom could have sworn he saw surprise in that alien gaze. Maybe even confusion. The creature's mouth moved and sound came out. It was like music almost, rising and falling tones that Tom's brain couldn't even begin to process as language. But the meaning was clear enough. Tom let out a tired laugh, his breath fogging in the cold. Yeah, I don't understand you either, pal. But you're welcome. The dragon blinked once, slowly, and Tom saw something he never expected to see in an alien's eyes. Gratitude. The dragon turned out to be female. Tom figured that out through gestures and body language over the first few days. She'd point to herself and make certain movements, and Tom, who'd spent decades reading animal behavior, caught on quick enough. By the second week she was moving around. Not flying yet, but walking, stretching her wings in the clearing near Tom's station. She never went far though. Always stayed within sight of the cabin, like she was afraid to leave. Or maybe she just didn't want to be alone again. Tom understood that feeling. The breakthrough came when Tom was tinkering in his workshop. He'd always been good with electronics, a hobby from his younger days. He'd noticed one of the devices on the dragon's harness was still functional, blinking with a soft blue light. Tom had his old ham radio equipment gathering dust in the corner, and he thought, why not? It took him 2 days of trial and error, connecting wires, adjusting frequencies. The dragon watched him work with curious eyes, tilting her massive head as he muttered to himself and soldered connections. Tom talked to her the whole time, even though she couldn't understand him. See, the way I figure it, he said, squinting at a circuit board, if your people can travel between stars, you've got to have some kind of universal communication system. Just need to find the right frequency. Then one morning, while Tom was pouring his coffee, the speakers crackled to life. You saved me. Tom nearly dropped his mug. The voice was feminine, soft but strong, filled with something that sounded like wonder. He turned to look at the dragon, who was staring at the makeshift translator set up between them. Well, I'll be damned, Tom said slowly. It actually worked. Why? The dragon asked. The word came through clearer now, like the system was adjusting. Why did you save me? Tom looked at her, this massive alien creature sitting in his clearing, and shrugged. You were dying. Seemed like the thing to do. Silence stretched between them. The morning birds were chirping, and somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Normal sounds in Tom's world, but he wondered what they sounded like to her. I am Kira, she finally said. I was once a sentinel of the Galactic Council. My kind, we are called Draconeth. We are few now. Very few. Tom Caldwell, he replied. Forest Ranger. Pretty much always been that. Kira's scales rippled, changing color slightly. Tom was learning that meant she was feeling emotional. My kind are hunted, Tom Caldwell. There are those in the galaxy who, they want our scales. They have healing properties. They can cure diseases, mend wounds that should be fatal. So we are hunted like animals, captured, harvested. Tom's jaw tightened. He'd seen poachers before, men who'd kill elephants for ivory or rhinos for their horns. The idea that it happened on a galactic scale made his blood boil. I fled, Kira continued. I was carrying information, evidence of slave rings and hunting operations. They pursued me across 3 systems. My ship was damaged. I tried to make an emergency landing, but your world's atmosphere was difficult. I crashed into your frozen lake. She made a sound that might have been a bitter laugh. The cold. I have been to ice planets before, but nothing like this. Your cold is different. It seeps into everything. It was killing me faster than my injuries. Alaska doesn't mess around, Tom said. He sat down on his porch steps, cradling his coffee. So these slavers, they coming back for you? Kira's eyes dimmed, the glow fading. Tom had learned that was her equivalent of looking sad or worried. Eventually. They have technology that tracks biological signatures. Unique energy patterns that living beings emit. I hoped that your cold would mask mine, confuse their sensors. But if they are determined enough, they will find me. How long we talking? Days. Perhaps a week. Maybe less. She looked at him with those ancient eyes. You should not be here when they come. You have done enough. More than anyone has done for my kind in decades. You should go somewhere safe. Tom took a long sip of his coffee. It was good coffee, fresh from the pot. He looked out at his forest, the trees he'd protected for 43 years, the mountains he knew better than his own reflection. Then we'd better get ready, he said simply. Kira made a sound of distress. You do not understand. These are not simple criminals. They are trained hunters. They have weapons that can disintegrate matter. Shields that stop most attacks. Ships that can level buildings. You cannot fight them. You are one old, she paused, searching for the word, one old human with primitive tools. Tom stood up, stretching his back. His knees popped. His shoulders ached like they always did in the morning. He looked at Kira and smiled. "Lady, I'm from Earth. We've been killing each other with sticks and rocks for thousands of years. Before we had fancy technology, we had to get creative. We set traps. We used our environment. We outsmarted things bigger and stronger than us because that's how we survived." He walked down the steps toward her. "Besides, you're under my protection now. That's not negotiable." Kira stared at him for a long moment. Her scales shifted through colors, blue to silver to something almost gold. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "Your species, you are very strange, Tom Caldwell." Tom grinned, that old familiar grin that used to drive his late wife crazy. "You have no idea, Kira. You really have no idea." Tom spent the next 5 days turning his forest into a death trap. He started before sunrise each morning when the air was so cold it hurt to breathe. Kira would watch from the clearing as the old ranger moved through the trees with a purpose she'd never seen before. This wasn't the gentle man who'd saved her life. This was someone else. Someone harder. Someone dangerous. Tom knew these woods like most people knew their own homes. Every trail, every ridge, every hollow. He'd walked them for 43 years in every season and every kind of weather. Now he was using that knowledge in ways he hadn't since Vietnam. First came the wire traps. Tom strung steel cable between trees at ankle height, carefully concealed under a thin layer of snow. He positioned them on the natural paths anyone would take through the forest. To Kira's surprise, he didn't hide them perfectly. "Why leave them slightly visible?" she asked, watching him work. Tom grunted as he tied off another line. "Because I want them to see these once. They'll step over them, feel smart about it. Won't be looking for the real trap 3 feet ahead." Next were the propane tanks. Tom had a dozen of them, some from his own supply, others he'd collected from abandoned cabins over the years. He buried them at strategic points, rigged with pressure plates he'd built from old bathroom scales and electric igniters. Cover them with snow and they were invisible. "Step on this," Tom explained, pointing to one of the concealed plates, and boom. The propane ignites. Won't kill someone in armor, but it'll sure as hell knock them off balance. Maybe rupture their eardrums. Definitely make them panic. Kira's eyes widened as she watched him work. This human, this elderly man who moved slow in the mornings and whose hands shook from the cold, was building a battlefield. Then came the pits. Tom spent 2 entire days digging holes in the frozen ground. His back screamed at him, his shoulders burned, but he kept going. Each pit was about 6 feet deep, lined with sharpened stakes. He covered them with thin branches and snow, marking each location in his mind. "These won't kill them if they've got armor," Tom said, wiping sweat from his forehead despite the cold. "But falling 6 feet onto stakes? That'll slow anyone down. Make them cautious. Cautious people make mistakes." Finally, he positioned his hunting rifles. Tom had 5 of them, collected over a lifetime. He placed each one at a different location, elevated positions with clear views of the killing zones below. He wrapped them in waterproof tarps and marked each spot. Kira examined one of the rifles curiously. Her claws were delicate as she touched the wooden stock. "These weapons," she said slowly, "they use chemical propulsion? Controlled explosions to launch projectiles." "That's right," Tom said, checking the scope on another rifle. "How primitive." Tom laughed, a short bark of amusement. "Primitive works just fine when you know how to use it. Your slavers, they'll have shields, right? Energy-based barriers." "Yes," Kira confirmed. "Our defensive technology is designed to deflect plasma weapons and energy attacks. Most advanced civilizations use such weapons. But a .308 round traveling at 2,800 feet per second? Tom smiled, and there was something cold in that smile. "That's just kinetic energy. Old-fashioned physics. A piece of metal moving really, really fast." Kira's scales shifted color rapidly, a sign of surprise. "Your people weaponized momentum itself?" "We weaponized everything," Tom said matter-of-factly. He moved to the next rifle position, his boots crunching in the snow. "Rocks, sticks, fire, wind, water, gravity. We didn't have fancy shields or plasma guns. We just had our brains and a whole lot of stubbornness. Had to get creative to survive." "Tell me about their tactics," Tom said as he worked. "How do they hunt your kind?" As Kira described the slaver methods, overwhelming force, advanced scanning, coordinated attacks, Tom nodded and adjusted his plans. He asked questions that surprised her. Questions about their communication systems, their standard operating procedures, their weaknesses. Between the work they talked about other things too. Kira told Tom about her people, the Draconeth. How they'd once been a proud warrior race, protectors of smaller civilizations. How they'd been betrayed by those they trusted, hunted down for the valuable properties in their scales. "We numbered in the millions once," Kira said softly. "Now we are perhaps a few thousand scattered across the galaxy. Hiding, running, dying alone." Tom was quiet for a moment, hammering a stake into the frozen ground. Then he spoke, his voice rough. "I did 2 tours in Vietnam. Came home in '73. My wife, Janet, she waited for me. We had a good life, 30 years together. Then cancer took her. Fast and mean." "I am sorry," Kira said. "Yeah, me too." Tom wiped his face. "Came out here after that. Couldn't stand being in town, being around people who didn't understand. Thought maybe I'd find some peace in the wilderness. And I did, mostly. Spent my time helping hikers, protecting the forest, taking care of the animals." "You have lost much," Kira observed gently. Tom looked up at her, this massive alien dragon who'd crashed into his life. "Everyone loses something eventually. The question isn't what you lost, it's what you do after. Do you give up or do you keep going?" He went back to hammering. "I chose to keep helping where I could. Seemed better than giving up." Kira's scales rippled through a dozen colors, flowing like water. Tom had learned this was her way of showing deep emotion. "My people have a word," she said. "Soul fierce. It means one who protects others even when their own heart is wounded. One who gives when they have little left to give." "You are soul fierce, Tom Caldwell." Tom snorted. "That's just a fancy way of saying stubborn." "Perhaps," Kira said, and Tom could hear the smile in her voice. "Perhaps your stubbornness is why your species survives." Tom paused in his work, looking out at the forest stretching before them. The trees stood silent and strong, like they'd stood for hundreds of years. He'd protected this place for most of his adult life. Now he'd protect Kira too. "Maybe you're right," he said quietly. "But right now, that stubbornness is why you're going to survive too. They want to hunt you? Fine. Let them come. This is my forest. My rules. And I'm going to teach them why you don't mess with humans on their own territory." They came on the 6th day just like Kira said they would. Tom was in his hide on the ridge, the one he'd built 30 feet up in an old spruce tree. He'd been there since before dawn, wrapped in white camouflage, barely moving. His breath came out in small puffs that he carefully directed away from his face so it wouldn't give away his position. The ships came through the clouds around noon. 3 of them, sleek and dark, shaped like nothing Tom had ever seen. They didn't make much noise, just a low hum that you felt in your chest more than heard. They landed in the clearing near his cabin, their landing gear crushing the snow. Tom watched through his rifle scope as the doors opened. 8 figures stepped out. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with armor that looked like insect shells, all segmented and gleaming. Their weapons were strange too, glowing with blue light, humming with power. The leader was obvious. He walked in front, moved different from the others. More confident. He carried a larger weapon and had extra markings on his armor. Tom heard the translator kick in, Kira's tech picking up their language and converting it. The leader's voice came through cold and professional. "One dying Draconith and a primitive native. Scan shows minimal threat level. This will be quick. Fan out. Standard retrieval pattern." Tom allowed himself a small smile. They had no idea what they were walking into. The hunters moved into the forest in a loose formation. Professional but not expecting trouble. Why would they? According to their scans, they were facing an old man with primitive weapons. The first hunter triggered the wire trap exactly where Tom thought he would. There was a soft click, then a massive explosion. The propane tank erupted in a ball of fire and shrapnel. The hunter's energy shields flared bright blue, stopping the flames. But the shields were designed for energy weapons, for plasma and lasers. The physical debris, chunks of metal and wood moving at high speed, punched right through. The hunter went down screaming, his armor torn open, his leg twisted at an ugly angle. The others scattered immediately, taking cover behind trees. Training kicked in. But they were scattered now, not in formation. Exactly what Tom wanted. That's when he took his first shot. The crack of the rifle was impossibly loud in the quiet forest. One of the hunters, the one crouching behind a birch tree, jerked backward. His helmet had a neat hole in it. His shield hadn't even flickered. The bullet had been too fast, too simple. Just a piece of metal, but moving at speeds their technology didn't consider a threat. The hunter dropped without a sound. "Hostile fire. Return fire," the leader shouted. Blue plasma bolts lit up the forest. Trees exploded into steam and splinters where the bolts hit. The hunters were firing at where the shot came from, but Tom was already gone. He'd planned 3 escape routes from every position. By the time they reached his tree, he was 200 yards away in a different hide. Tom moved through the forest like a ghost. His knees hurt, his back ached, but adrenaline and muscle memory from 50 years ago took over. This was just like the jungle. Different trees, different enemy, but the same principles. It didn't move. Never stay still. Use the terrain. Another hunter ran right over one of the concealed pits. The false floor gave way and he dropped 6 feet onto the sharpened stakes below. His armor saved his life, but Tom heard him screaming. A 6-foot fall onto stakes, even with armor, had to hurt like hell. "Where is he?" one of the hunters yelled. "Sensors aren't picking him up." Tom had figured they'd have advanced sensors. That's why he'd rolled in the dirt, covered himself in pine sap and snow. Their technology was looking for heat signatures and electronic signals. Tom was giving them nothing but background noise. Kira swept overhead, her massive form casting shadows. She couldn't fight, not yet, still too weak. But she didn't need to. She just needed to confuse their sensors, draw their attention up while Tom worked from below. Another hunter turned to track Kira's flight, and Tom shot him from 150 yards. Center mass. The bullet went through the armor joint at the shoulder. The hunter spun and fell. The remaining hunters were panicking now. Tom could hear it in their voices. They'd gone from confident professionals to scared men in under 10 minutes. "Regroup. Back to the ships," the leader ordered. But Tom had planned for that too. The path back to the clearing was lined with his best traps. Another explosion. Another hunter down. Then another fell into a pit. By the time the sun started setting, there were only 2 left. The leader and one other hunter, both injured, both terrified. Tom found them trying to get back to their ships. He stepped out from behind a tree, his shotgun leveled. The leader spun around, bringing his plasma weapon up. "Right here," Tom said quietly. The leader froze. At this range, maybe 15 feet, his shields meant nothing. Tom's shotgun was loaded with double-aught buckshot. 9.33 caliber lead balls per shell. At point-blank range, no energy shield in the galaxy could stop that much kinetic energy. "You're just a primitive," the leader said, his voice shaking. "Yeah," Tom replied. "But I'm a primitive who knows his home. You never should have come here." The shotgun blast echoed through the forest. By nightfall it was over. 8 professional hunters, trained and equipped with technology centuries beyond Earth's, defeated by one 70-year-old man and his wounded dragon. Tom sat on a fallen log, breathing hard. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline wearing off. Kira landed beside him with a heavy thump, her eyes scanning him with concern. "You are bleeding," she said, her voice tight with worry. Tom looked down. His jacket was burned, a plasma bolt had grazed his ribs. "Yeah. Got careless on the last one. I've had worse." He looked at the bodies scattered through his forest. 8 beings far from home, dead because they'd come hunting. Tom didn't feel good about it. He never felt good about killing. But he'd do it again to protect Kira. "They got a distress signal out, didn't they?" Tom asked. "Yes," Kira said quietly. "Before you disabled their ships. The Council will receive it. They will come. They will know about your world now." Tom nodded tiredly, wincing as his ribs protested. "Well, guess we better clean up before the company arrives. Can't have Earth's first impression be a battlefield." Kira's scales rippled with something like laughter. "Tom Caldwell, I think the battlefield might be exactly the right first impression for your species." 6 months had changed everything, but somehow Tom's morning routine stayed the same. He still woke up at 5:30. Still made his coffee the same way, 3 scoops in the old percolator. Still walked out onto his porch to watch the sunrise. The difference now was that sometimes he had company. A 30-foot dragon usually perched on the ridge above his cabin, watching the same sunrise with eyes that had seen 1,000 worlds. The Galactic Council had arrived 2 weeks after the battle. Tom had expected guns and accusations. Instead they'd sent diplomats. Cautious ones sure, but diplomats nonetheless. Turned out killing syndicate slavers was actually a good thing in most parts of the galaxy. The Council had been looking for evidence against the syndicate for years. What they hadn't expected was to find that evidence on a primitive world that wasn't even supposed to have spacefaring capability yet. The lead ambassador, a tall being that looked like a mantis wearing a suit, had walked carefully through Tom's forest. He'd examined the trap sites, the rifle positions, the destroyed slaver ships. Then he turned to Tom and said something that translated to, "You did this with chemical propulsion weapons and combustible gas? And some rope," Tom had added helpfully. "Don't forget the rope." The ambassador had made a noise that the translator couldn't interpret. Later, Kira told Tom it was the sound their species made when they didn't know whether to be impressed or horrified. Earth got classified as a death world after that. Apparently, most civilized planets didn't have weather that could kill you in minutes, animals that saw humans as food, or gravity strong enough to build the kind of muscles that let Tom carry 100-pound packs through mountains. The Council granted Earth-protected status. No contact, no interference, no exploitation. They'd check back in 100 years, see if humanity had figured out space travel on their own. It was the standard procedure for primitive worlds that showed potential. Except Tom's cabin became the exception. Kira had explained soul bonding to him one night, about 3 weeks after the battle. They were sitting by the fire, Tom nursing a beer, Kira's scales reflecting the firelight. When a Draconith is saved from certain death, she'd said, we bond to our savior. For life. It's not a choice, not really. It's something deeper, written into our biology, our culture, our souls. Tom had taken a long drink of his beer. I'm 70 years old, Kira. I'm not gonna be around for much longer. Then I will be here until you are not. Her voice had been simple, final. You are stuck with me, old human. And she'd meant it. Kira settled onto the ridge above Tom's cabin like she'd always been there. She helped him with his ranger work, spotting lost hikers from the air, warning him about incoming storms. In return, Tom made sure she had enough food and kept the curious government people away when they got too pushy. Because yeah, the government had shown up eventually. Men in suits, asking questions, wanting to take Kira to a facility, wanting to study Tom's tactics. Tom had told them politely but firmly that Kira wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he. When they'd pushed, Kira had positioned herself between Tom and the suits, all 30 feet and several tons of her, and made it clear whose side she was on. The suits had backed off after that. Life settled into a new kind of normal. Tom still did his ranger rounds, checking trails and maintaining cabins. The difference now was the occasional alien researcher he'd find setting up equipment. They were studying Earth's weather, its biology, trying to understand how such a primitive world produced beings like Tom. He tried to tell them he wasn't special, but they didn't believe him. One evening, about 6 months after everything started, Tom was sitting on his porch with his evening coffee. The sun was setting, painting the sky in oranges and purples. A ship descended in the distance, heading for the new research facility the council was building 20 miles away. It was becoming a regular sight. Kira landed beside the cabin with a heavy thump that made the porch shake. She settled in, that contented rumble in her chest that Tom had learned meant she was happy. The council has requested you as Earth's ambassador, she said casually. Tom snorted into his coffee. I'm a forest ranger, not a politician. Tell them to ask someone who wears a tie. You are the human who taught the galaxy that compassion and strength are not opposites, Kira said. Her eyes gleamed with amusement. You are also the only human who has a Draconith guardian. That carries weight in council chambers. Guardian, huh? That what we're calling it? I am calling it what it is. Kira's scales rippled through soft colors. You saved me when you had every reason not to. When it was dangerous, when it was illogical, when it benefited you nothing. Now I save you. I protect you. And through you, perhaps I protect your entire world. Tom was quiet for a moment, watching another ship descend. First contact hadn't come through governments or militaries, through prepared speeches or careful diplomacy. It had come because one old man couldn't walk away from someone dying in the cold. Never thought I'd spend retirement dealing with aliens, Tom said finally. Kira's laugh was like wind chimes in a breeze. And I never thought I would owe my life to a human, a species I did not know existed. Yet here we are. Here we are, Tom agreed, raising his coffee mug slightly. Out there, somewhere in the vast galaxy, other species were learning about Earth. Learning that humans were dangerous, yes, but not because of advanced weapons or superior technology. They were dangerous because of something harder to quantify. Because they'd adopt an injured wolf and call it family. Because they'd risk everything for a stranger. Because they simply refused to abandon those they chose to protect. And in a small cabin in the Alaskan wilderness, an old ranger and an ancient dragon sat together, watching the stars come out. Two beings who shouldn't have met, who came from worlds impossibly far apart, now bound together by something as simple and profound as kindness. The galaxy was watching Earth now. And maybe, Tom thought, taking another sip of coffee, maybe that wasn't such a bad thing. Maybe humanity was exactly what the galaxy needed.